Thank you very much for coming here today, and thank you to all of the ACCJ people who are putting themselves in my dangerous hands. I appreciate the confidence that you give me, and I'll try not to violate it. I give lots of presentations, and I kind of enjoy it because I'm in advertising, so the creatives are the ones who, during an advertising pitch, we do the, the solution is pow, right? And it's fun, but the dynamic is different than this presentation is going to be, because usually what happens is if they don't like the presentation, they'll just pay someone else. In this case, you've paid. And if you don't like the presentation, you'll just be pissed. And that makes me a little nervous. I'd like to think, I was kind of acting like I'm not nervous, but I cut myself shaving like 4 times this morning. I guess I'm nervous. So thank you for the introduction too. I'm currently the ECD of science for Japan and Korea. Until about a week ago, I was simply the ECD for healthcare in Japan. I first came to Japan in 1992, and I was here for a number of years, and then I married a Japanese woman and had 3 half-Japanese children, and we moved back again 6 years ago, and I'm not going anywhere. I call myself a Naijin. Anyone who's been here for a long time might understand what that is. It's not the opposite of gaijin, it's the opposite of fly-gene. Does anyone get that joke? No? All right, well, the Naijin understand. And it was mentioned that I've written a couple of books, and I've won some awards with the help of wonderful staff that I was able to develop over the last 6 years of about 30 people. That's just for you to keep in the back of your mind in case, thanks. In case this presentation goes awry. I'm going to assume about you one basic thing, which is that you probably are not totally normal people, because if you were, why would you be here right now? Not that you paid for this thing in particular, but a lot of you are foreigners who found yourself living in Tokyo. If you weren't a risk taker, you probably would still be in Iowa, right? Some of you are Japanese and you're here at the American Club listening to this. What kind of decisions have you made that brought you here? Probably weren't typical decisions. And that's important because what I can talk to you about is how to not make typical decisions. That's sort of my job. So please be true to yourselves and brave in your thinking, as you must have been to have come this far. I'd like to give you a disclaimer. This is Tim O'Brien. I consider him a short story writer. I think he's written some novels as well. This was him as a young man in Vietnam. And the experience of being a soldier in Vietnam informed him a lot, and that's what he writes about. He wrote this book that was really acclaimed called Going After Cacciato, which is really great. And really, it's a collection of short stories that are thematically related. And one of the stories is called How to Tell a True War Story. And it's great. It's so good. And the point of the story is that he lays out the facts of an episode that happened to him when he was in Vietnam. And that's half the story. And then as the narrator, he comes in, he's like, wait, right? That is in fact the fact of what happened, but it doesn't express the truth of what that story means to me or what it is about. Let me tell that story in a new way. And then he fabricates a story around the facts of the story that he just relayed and says that tells the truth, but it's not factual, right? That's what an urban legend is. The reason that I'm saying that this is a disclaimer is that some of the examples that I've got in my presentation might be false. My father was a collector of interesting stories, and some of them were interesting business stories. And among those business stories, some of them may be not factually true, but they demonstrate a truth. And I still think that's noble. I like the urban legend as a category because I think it's kind of the inheritor of the fairy tale, right? What's the point of a fairy tale is no one probably ever believed that Little Red Riding Hood did those things, right? But it's a valuable story because it teaches you a truth even though it's not factually true. So if I've got any facts wrong, forgive me and understand that that's not really the point, especially because I might be talking about examples that involve companies that you work for. If you want to accuse me of slander, I recommend you do it on Facebook because I don't use it. And the final thing, and this is in case I couldn't get a laugh out of you so far, if it's really bad, just remember that a chicken died for you. And who can really put a life price on the life of a chicken? So at least you had this opportunity to sit among each other and eat a nice chicken or shrimp. I'm going to start with an anecdote so you have some idea of where, you probably have an idea already, but the way that this presentation is going to go. Some years ago, like 15 years ago, I was living in New York City and walking down the street and I felt terrible. And my boss was angry at me for something. My wife was angry at me for something. And they were definitely both right. And I was walking down the street feeling like hell and trying to figure out how am I going to solve the professional problems I'm having. Should I talk to Ed, or should I talk to Ed's boss, or maybe I should not talk to Ed, and maybe I should buy my wife a flower, I don't know. And so I'm going to, when we have these times, right, you're walking down the road feeling bad. It's like every Grateful Dead song is called that. And I walk by these kids on a park bench, all right? About this age, maybe a little older. They were young enough that their feet didn't reach the ground. They were swinging their legs and sitting there contentedly under a freaking tree on a park bench without a care in the world. And to really rub it in, they're drinking Nestle Quick out of cartons with straws, right? Now pass by these kids, kicking their legs and just sitting there like buddies, and there's plenty of room on the bench, but they're sitting next to each other. It's right? And it's the innocence and the joy of not having a care in the world that we lose when we grow up. And I walk by, I'm like, damn kids, right? It's the nerve of those kids, right? I was found myself thinking, as I walked past them, I was like, I wish I could just sit on a bench, and then I was like, I wish I could get chocolate milk. Right, that would be awesome, right? I could just sit on a bench and drink chocolate milk, right? And then I kept walking, and I was like, yeah, that would have been great. And then I had the next kind of moment of being thunderstruck. I was like, the benches are for everybody. And my money buys chocolate milk just as well as a 10-year-old's, money buys chocolate milk, and this is accessible to me. So what happened, right? So I did it, and I still drink chocolate milk when I'm down, which means that I drink a lot of chocolate milk. So what happened is that somehow I nearly tricked myself out of a solution to a problem that I was having, because, why? That's what I want to talk about. How do we trick ourselves out of the solutions that we should have available to us to problems, right? We screw ourselves out of lots of great ideas through weird mechanisms, and I want to talk about some of them that I think I've identified, and I'm sure there are a bunch of other ones. So keep in mind the chocolate milk example, okay? And what I think is that I've been able to categorize three pitfalls when you're faced with a problem, three pitfalls that stop you from the proper creative solution. And if I can reiterate what was said earlier, a non-creative solution to any problem will make your company or your life as average as possible. If you try to figure out how to solve a problem in a way that is typical and it's got lots of precedent, then at best you will hit the 50th percentile, right? And the real innovators and the real kind of kings of industry and the people who have driven everything forward are creatives, right? But that doesn't mean that they're painters or writers. They're just, in fact, intrinsically creatives because they're coming up with crazy solutions to problems, right? That's the creative process, right? That's the creative point, all right? What I'm going to talk about are what I think are three useful ways to think about how we stop ourselves from coming up with great solutions, which is ignoring yourself, biasing your output, and then being Newtonian. I'm a copywriter, and I needed a cool way to say respecting cause and effect too much. All right? And I'll get into each of these one at a time, and some of them are going to be personal stories, and some of them will not. Ignoring yourself. So I came to Japan in 1992, as I mentioned earlier, and it was different. The culture and the people were somewhat different, and also the gaijin community was different at that time. This isn't too far off, insofar as I came here in a kind of immigration wave of faux English teachers, right? People who came here and worked at like Eon or whatever to get visas, but they were pretty much just adventurers, and not here because they were sent, and not necessarily here even because it was Japan, it's just here because it was far. And that's really why I came. And then I'm a Jewish kid from New York City, and I'm in Japan and struggling through and doing what I can and not being able to explain to the dry cleaner that I need to clean something, and just like hungry, but they won't let me into the McDonald's because of something that happened. Like just typical like gaijin problems for a 21-year-old in 1992. And one of the things that occurred to me, I was like, man, I wish I could have a bagel, right? This is important to me, because if I could have a bagel, they call it soul food, right? Maybe Jews don't call it soul food, but it is soul food, right? It's like good for your soul. It's like, this is like my home, and it's the taste of what I'm comfortable with, right? Boy, would it be great if I could have a bagel. And I thought, geez, someone should like make a bagel shop, right? That would be a good idea. Like, why wouldn't they like bagels, right? It's lots of fish. People like bread. All the ingredients are here. What the hell, right? So that would be great, right? And then I left the country. I come back, and there's tons of bagels. There's like a bagel industry. And I'm pissed, right? And I was like, that's my idea. Like, I had that idea, right? And yet, somehow, I tricked myself out of thinking that I had that idea, because I depersonalized it, and I thought, like, wouldn't it be great if somebody, bleh, right? And you do it all the time. I did it this morning. I was on my way. I haven't worn these shoes in a long time. These are like my try to make myself feel cool shoes, and they're like, they could be polished a little bit better. And I was like, you know what? In today's modern world of sensors and whatnot, and I can like read Apocrypha and talk to like someone in Europe at the same time because I have a box in my pocket. Like, how come there's not a thing that I can stick my foot into that's gonna like shine my shoes in the station on the way here? It would be great if someone came up with that. No, that's insane. I just came up with that. Now, am I gonna invest in it? I don't think so, right? But like actually, getting distance from a problem is a really useful tool to solve a problem. And at the same time, it's an incredibly dangerous pitfall, because you get distance from it by depersonalizing it and imagine what if someone else was solving this problem in your mind, right? But in fact, it's you. You're just playing a game with yourself, and it's so easy to just be like, man, that would be great. I wish I had that idea. I've literally said that before. I wish I had that idea, based on an idea that I just had, right? You definitely do this, all right? Meanwhile, those people are rolling in dough. I'm not. I've got one nice suit of clothes. You definitely do this, all right? I don't, it may not sound like it resonates, I'm not sure. I know everyone in the world does this, all right? Because anytime in your mind or in your speech you say, somebody oughta, or wouldn't it be great if, right? Or whatever it is, what I wish I could do? Those are ideas that you yourself are generating, but somehow you're depersonalizing them and assigning the responsibility to someone else in your mind, right? I'm not supposed to be a motivational speaker, but I feel strongly about these things. The Nestle Quick example was an example of one of those opportunities nearly slipping away, all right? The problem was that I felt like hell. The solution that I thought was that I needed to unravel the individual sources of that problem. And then this other solution presented itself to me through these children of, why don't I just ignore the problem, sit in the shade and drink something that tastes good, and that would make me feel better. That's the real problem. Right? And I was like, wow, I wish I had that idea. You definitely do this, and this is a very dangerous thing. All right, let's do a very quick exercise. You're not going to have to share this with anybody, okay? But I'm going to make you write something down. What I'd like you to do, there's some paper on the middle. You might have brought your own paper. There's a couple of pens there. What I'd like you to do is create your own flag, all right? And again, this is not going to be like a kumbaya, like, red represents my, enthusiasm. You're not going to have to explain it to the group. But think about it for a second, and think about, and here's some flags, all right? You like sunshine, put a sun in it. If you're into books, put a book. If you're like, kind of more into symbolic things, it could be a shape or a color, right? Just think about it. Are you done? Are you finished? I'm just kidding. By the way, while we're on this slide, does anyone know, are there still cedars in Lebanon? Are there still cedars in Lebanon, right? The cedars of Lebanon are biblically famous, right? And there's a cedar on the flag. The cedars, are there still cedars? I've never been to Lebanon. All right, it may not be perfect, but hopefully you've got one or two elements or you have a thought or whatever. When you're making a flag, what's the first thing that you do? Right? You make a rectangle, right? And then you fill in the rectangle, right? Sorry, but we established already that you're not typical people and not typical thinkers, and so why would you start with a rectangle? That's so sad. You didn't need to start with a rectangle, right? So you've already preordained that the solution you're going to come up with is like 99% of all the solutions that anyone else is going to come up with because you started with a rectangle and then start thinking. That's not part of the problem solving, right? That's the frame, right? It's not necessary, right? If anyone here was from Nepal, you might have drawn a triangle, right? Nepal's got such a cool flag. I don't know if I like the graphics on it that much, but it's two triangles. I mean, what were they taking? This is awesome. This is a great flag, right? And then the heraldry, you know, like we had like, you know, the medieval kind of tradition of like long flags with a fishtail that would hang off a wall, right? But why is a flag got to be a rectangle in that particular dimension, right? You can keep your flag if you really like it. This is the second thing that I think is important to talk about, which is about biasing your output, and I think that that's kind of an example of it. You and I, we pre-answer lots of questions based on the way that we phrase or form the question to ourselves, right? And to me, this is the most common and the most dangerous example. And here I'm going to use what may be an urban myth from the business world. It's a great story about Arm & Hammer baking soda. It's a really, really old product, right? And for decades, what they did was slowly lose money because baking was becoming less and less popular over time. And their whole basis for the marketing of the product was, and it was really clever, especially for its time, let's put a recipe on the box, and that will teach people how to use the product, and thereby they will consume the product faster, then they'll need it again. Then they'll get a new recipe. It's pretty intelligent, right? So they would get home recipes from intelligent grandmothers, right? And then their consumers were happy, right? And they'd use it at a steady rate. But the problem was that the baking industry itself was shrinking. The pie was shrinking. It's funny. The pie was shrinking. And so they do all this market research. And the market research was to say, you know, what recipe can we put on next? You know, maybe we haven't focused enough on strawberries, and that's why people aren't buying enough because they're tired of all the chocolate. And, you know, just like within the realm of the recipe thinking, how are they going to improve their performance? This is one crazy lady that they spoke to, or eccentric. When you get old, you get to be eccentric. That's so cool. When I was young, I was just crazy. But anyway, so this one lady, they were like, how do you use baking soda? She's like, I pour it in the sink, right? I'm like, out of your mind, right? And they were like, no, madam, that's not exactly what we mean, right? Like, how else do you use baking soda? It's like, I leave it open in the fridge, right? It's like, you know, okay, thank you for your time. You know, please pick up your, you know, check and get out, and talk to the next person about recipes. Some kid, young person back at the ranch reviewing all of the tapes of the market research looks at this and is like, do you know what this means, right? People would buy the product in order to throw it away. Wow, that's like the best marketing idea ever, all right? And if you've gone through American advertising, you know that this is the basis of the advertising campaigns that they did for many years. And in fact, this was the only advertising, the only type of promotion that Arm & Hammer did during my young lifetime. And it was not until I was in my 30s that I understood that baking soda is for baking things. This is how important that campaign became, right? And then the sales went up and everyone's got, I don't know how it's doing now, but what a story. They just asked the wrong question, right? Which recipe should we put on the box? Mrs. McGillicuddy's thing is really delicious, but it takes a lot of time, and Mrs. Johnson's is not as good, but it's easy, and like, you know? And it's just the wrong question. The question is, the reason we're putting the thing on the box, right, is how do we sell this crap, right? And to get people to throw it away, that is amazing, and it worked, right? So to me, as just an example, there are many, many, many examples of biasing the question. The flag is one of them as well. To me, the answer here is to swim upstream every time you've got a question in front of you, or a problem that you think needs to be solved. You have to swim as upstream as you possibly can. And the process is really easy. When you've got a problem in front of you, you have to ask why, right? We need a new recipe. Why? Because we use the recipes so people will buy it. Why? Because it's a company and we want to make more money. Oh, right? So it doesn't have to be a recipe, it's just you needed more money, right? That's a totally different kind of problem. That's basically what creatives do, right? Because we're given problems that are wrong constantly. And then our job is to politically, carefully, or not, somehow represent back to the source of the problem that that problem was the wrong problem, that it was they're solving the wrong question, right? Repeat that until you get to some kind of weird metaphysical moment where you're just like, but why do you want money? It's like, because, you know, money is currency and God made that. You know, he's like, okay, that's weird. I can't solve that. And then you step back one level, right, and figure out some problem that's actually solvable, right? And then you solve the problem, right? There are lots of examples. Give me like a 7-hour slot and I'll go through more. Here's another potential urban legend, but I think it might be true. IBM had an opportunity to acquire Xerox when Xerox was an IPO, all right? And Xerox invented the photocopier, and IBM was like, that's odd, right? A box, right? So, you know, think about it, like without the knowledge of a photocopier, it needs to be explained. It's like a large box, and you put it on, and then you make a copy. Wow, okay, cool. So what was the direct competitor to this at that time was carbon paper, right? I'm old enough that I've played with carbon paper, but it was already old when I found it in my dad's desk, right? They did an analysis, and they concluded that if 100% of the time that people used carbon paper, instead they used a photocopier, that it would never be profitable. What a terribly wrong question that turned out to have been, right? Now, I don't know that any of us would have been intelligent enough in that situation to have thought, like, wait a second, like, maybe they'll make copies of more things because it's not as, you know, blue and messy. Or maybe actually what we'll make money on is the maintenance or the toner. It's like, you know, whatever. They maybe didn't go that deep. But what a wasted opportunity, right? You know, for years, getting into the movies was cheap, right? But the popcorn was fabulously expensive because they weren't making money off of the tickets. It was just the popcorn. That is a great idea, right? That's what I'm talking about. Like when I talk about creativity isn't the realm of people who draw things, right? Some very creative person said, let's pretty much just give the entrance away, and we'll charge them $8 for the popcorn. And someone's like, are you out of your mind? I was like, yeah, but totally, everyone wants popcorn. You sit there for 2 hours, you want popcorn, right? You totally pay for it, especially because the ticket was so cheap, right? It's brilliant. That person was intrinsically a creative, but that person also might have been into real estate, and they were buying, you know, movie theaters and construction, right? But that's a creative, right? And then the last thing, am I going too fast or too slow? Yeah? You want me to start over? No? Being Newtonian, right? So this is about cause and effect. And this is going to be one more quick exercise, okay? And this one you are going to have to share, but it's not particularly creative, so don't worry. I know as a creative how vulnerable and horrible it feels to do something that you think is creative and have to share it with someone. I know that some of you have written poems that you never showed to anyone. You like put in your drawer, and like if anyone found them, you'd be mortified. Like a day in the life of creative is like being forced to show someone your private poems every day, right? So I understand, but this is not going to be a creative exercise. All I need you to do is take a piece of paper and on the front write down in your handwriting, this is my handwriting. And then on the back, please put your name. And if you're worried about someone stealing your fortune, you can print your name. And then, having done that, please hand it to a stranger. Are we all good? Okay, now hold on to that piece. You don't need to do anything with it yet, but please don't use it. Don't lose it. Okay, everyone should now be holding a piece of paper that someone else wrote that says, "This is my handwriting." Yes? No? Yeah? Well, I'm glad I didn't ask for anything really complicated. Okay, now let's talk quickly about Steve Jobs. What's really cool about Steve Jobs is everyone seems to own him. It's amazing how he defies categories. If you're a tech guy, you love Steve Jobs. If you're a cancer person, you love Steve Jobs. If you're a college dropout, you love Steve Jobs. If you're a designer, you love Steve Jobs. It's like everything. Everyone gets to claim him as their property. It's amazing how hated he seems to have been and how loved he is now. And I think it's because he's so cross category. Before he dropped out of college, he was interested in design, right? And that's, the kind of natural output of that is, the Apple products are designed like crazy. They're wonderful. And his particular personal interest was in typography, and so he studied typography, which is the kind of thing that your parents are like, "What are you spending my money studying typography? This isn't why I sent you to college. Learn a skill," right? But he's into it, and so he studied typography. And then, of course, he loaded it up onto these machines, right? And now, and actually as soon as that happened, it became an extraordinarily important feature of the computer, right? At the time that this happened, they were still competing with the 486s, IBM, no mouse, black screen, green flashing cursor, right? DOS shell, right? And there were lots of cool innovations about the Apple. However, definitely one of them was the font menu. Okay, I can make it look anything, that's incredible. So what I mean by being Newtonian is to believe too much in cause and effect and to wait for a problem to occur in order to develop a solution. It seems like a shame, because that's not what this was a good example of, right? Nobody was in the world of learning DOS, right? No one was saying what I wish was that I could make my type look lots of different ways. Then I would buy that, right? No one would ever dream to say that. It's the same thing as when they used to do market research, as we do in every single industry. When there was an electric typewriter, was the hottest thing. You ask a bunch of electric typewriter users, what is it that you would like to see happen to our machine, right? They would say it should go faster, or I wish it didn't hum as loud. Sometimes it gets warm, right? Innovation tweaks, right? No one would have said, man, I wish it remembered stuff, right? That's a computer. But the typewriter became the computer. But no one would have ever said, if it could just remember things, that would be great. You'd sound insane. You'd sound like the lady who poured stuff in the drain, right? So they came up with that solution in advance of the need, right? And then we talk about generating the need. I don't believe in that really, but I do think that you can kind of catalyze a nascent, latent need, right? At least a desire. This is the original lyric sheet of In My Life, which I will now perform. No. In John Lennon's handwriting, right? So think about your handwriting that you just gave away to someone. You might not have much pride in your handwriting, but face it, you do. You've been working on it for your whole life. If you didn't like it that way, you would have made it look some other way, right? I think my handwriting is so cool. I'm not expecting other people to think that. I love my handwriting. That's why I write that way. I've been perfecting it for 45 years. You have too, right? Whether you think that way or not, it couldn't have come out the way it is now unless that's the way you wanted it. You've been working on it forever, and no one's got yours. And no one's got this one. But how cool would it be if, I wanted to send someone a message of peace, and I was like, I'm going to type this in Lennon, right? Why not? Why can't I have that font, right? You've all got your own font. You've each generated your own font over the course of your life. It's a fantastic solution to something. But what? I don't know. I just know it's a great idea, right? Like, so now we could potentially like retrofit a problem onto this solution, right? Now take a look. Now you've got someone's font, right? You could take a look at that. Like, what if that was your handwriting? Or what if you could type a letter in that, right? And you know the technology's there, because when I, type something wrong, the computer corrects it, all right? If you write in your own handwriting the letter T, and then later you write an H, and then later you write an E, and then you scrunch those together, that's not the way you write the. But if you write a THE, I know that the computer can autocorrect that into the particular way that you write the entire graphic of the, right? It's totally there. I'm not a programmer. Maybe one of you is. It's my idea and it's on the record. So what's the problem that this could potentially solve? That's the fun thing, right? So this is going backwards and not waiting. Is the problem just that we wish we were richer? And we were like, wow, people would like have fun with this and we could charge them every time that they type an A, they owe me 2 yen or something. Maybe, I don't know. That's not that exciting to me. I'm in healthcare, right? So I tend to think about like who needs this kind of thing. And this is, it's called Adam. That's scary. That's my name. But anyway, this is rheumatoid arthritis, right? You might have a grandmother or a friend of a grandmother who's got their fingers all curled up because of rheumatoid arthritis. You cannot use your handwriting anymore, right? And that generation's into letter writing. When was the last time that you received a letter? Right? I had a friend in New York who was really high maintenance, and I decided to stop paying attention to him for a little while just for my own well-being. And so I stopped answering his emails, and I would like ignore when he called me, and I thought I could apologize sometime later. And he sent me a letter in the mail written by hand, and it struck me with so much force. I was like, I got a handwritten letter from a friend that was folded on notebook paper. I was like, and I had to call the guy, right? Because it's so retro, right? But like, that's your personality is in your handwriting. I mean, that's part of your identity is in your handwriting, right? So you lose that if you lose the use of your fingers in some kind of normal way. Or this is my friend Hito. I don't know if any of you are familiar with him and his story, but he's got ALS. He's lost everything except for a very small amount of eye movement. So there's a long time where he was communicating by typing with his eyes. This is reverse engineered technology that we used in advertising to figure out where's the eye looking when we give you an ad, all right? It was like, here's an ad. Oh, they looked at, the woman's hairstyle for way too long. Let's make her hairstyle a little less cool, right? We want them to look at the headline. So we can track where the eye goes. And then someone's like, well, if so, you can type with your eyes, if we just reverse engineer that. And so he uses this technology to communicate. How nice would it be for him to be able to have that come out in his handwriting? Because that's a last vestige of your personality. And when you're like not moving and you're typing with your eyes, it's, even for people who are friends with you, it's like sort of dehumanizing and weird, right? But if it was his handwriting, you'd be like, oh yeah, it's Hiro, I remember him, this is how he is, So I think that there are uses now. Are these profitable uses? Is it worth the investment? I don't know, right? But just because you have a great idea that doesn't match up with a problem that you're trying to solve doesn't mean that it's not the solution to something, right? Okay, this is just about the end. And this one, you don't have to write anything down, but this is a test. So just think about this, and this is also in my particular realm because it's healthcare related. How would you increase the donations of hair to make wigs, to make kids, that would be voodoo, to make wigs for children undergoing chemotherapy? All right? We know that there are kids in cancer wards, they lose their hair and they're sad, and you can donate hair. So just think about it. Come up with an idea in your mind. And then this is a solution that I saw when I was attending award shows last year in my industry that made me feel like Salieri. Anyone see Amadeus, right? And I was like, oh my God, Mozart is somewhere else and it's not me, And I was like, I wish I had the talent to think that way, right? This has made me so jealous, and it's so beautiful, in my opinion. So let me share it for you. This is someone in Mexico coming up with their solution to that question.
nacional a favor de niños que padecen cáncer.
Nos vemos en la calle y decimos, no, este es metalero, pero también con el metal se puede hacer el bien.
I'm so jealous of that it took my mic away. That's the greatest solution I could imagine. I was like, I actually have seen that video a number of times because I like to use it in some of my internal presentations, and I literally almost cry whenever I see it because it's such a beautiful solution. And it's not just beautiful for the beneficiaries, which are the kids. It's for the metalheads, right? I come from a rock and roll kind of background. You know, it's in my family, and it's not looked upon by society with a lot of respect or love. But some of the nicest people in the world that you'll ever meet are real outsiders, because if you think about it, outsiders are probably not very likely to reject you based on the fact that you're weird, right? I used to hang around a lot in the East Village in New York City, and there's no group of people will accept you faster than, like, you know, transsexuals with tattoos on their face. It's like, what are they gonna be? Like, no, you're different, you know? Like, and it was like, if you accept them, they'll automatically accept you. So metalheads, there are a lot of wonderful metalheads, right? You know, it was like, and they've got the hair. They don't use hair dye. I was like, oh, it's so perfect. So as a PR move for the metalheads, plus, of course, the actual point, which is to give the hair to the kids. It's like 107 kids, I think it was. That's the best thing ever. And if you had an idea anywhere near like that, I didn't. Right? I wish I had this idea. I wouldn't show you my own work. It's not this good. Then I would be the proudest man in the world, and whoever these guys are deserve to think that they're the best. Very, very final thought is to embrace the creative imperative. I think that the idea of the strategic imperative is part of our lexicon. But put yourself in the head of a professional creative for a second. A lot of creatives are not professional creatives, they're artists. You could be a professional artist. That means that people buy your stuff. And maybe they commission things. But if you're a professional creative, you could be in-house or you could be working in an agency or like a design shop. If you're in-house, it's kind of the easy track. And if you're working in a design shop or an advertising agency, you're gonna sweat. It's gonna be really hard. And the reason is that the other creatives are coming up with their own problems to solve, right? Banksy, I showed you a Banksy earlier, the kid walking, that was how I felt. No one's telling him what to do. He's like, I think the problem is that this corporation sucks, so I'm gonna vandalize their thing in this way. And I was like, cool, you got a problem and a solution right there. Now, as a professional creative, if you guys pay my president to ask us to solve something, it doesn't matter if your question's wrong, right? Because like I can't be like, sorry, wrong question, we're not gonna do that, I'll lose my job, right? That's the creative imperative. You have to solve the problem. If you're not a professional creative, frankly, solving a problem is almost always optional. Because you could just be like, I couldn't solve that problem and I'll think about something else and do it 6 months from now or a year from now or never, right? If you imagine for a second that you're like a professional creative and that your salary depends on solving this unsolvable problem, you will solve the problem, right? Either by realizing that the problem was wrong, that that question was wrong, you know, whatever it is, hopefully one of these, hopefully one that's not here, you can tell me about some other category of ways that we trick ourselves out of great solutions, that would be fantastic. But you have to act like your life depends on it, because problems are hard. Otherwise they wouldn't be called problems, right? And they're easy to ignore and they're easy to procrastinate. The creative imperative is that you're gonna die if you don't solve that problem. All right, that's it. Thank you very, very much to the people who let me do this. Amasan, ACCJ members, and before I came here, I was worried that the only people who would show up would be people who used to know me and don't like me. And I would look around and be like, oh my God, it's Howie, sorry, you know, or whatever. And then I alternatively was also afraid that I wouldn't know anyone. And now it's a nice mix of people who I have known in the past and people I don't know, and I'm equally afraid of both of you. But anyway, thank you very much, and I hope that this was worth your time. And that's my email if I'm available for bar mitzvahs if you want. Shoot me a line if you want to. Thank you very much.